Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. We are going to be concluding Hilchos Me'ilah by learning the final 8th chapter. Actually, through that, also making a siyum on the entire Sefer Avodah Mazel Tov, and we will be starting the next Sefer, the 9th Sefer Karbanos, beginning with Hilchos Karban Pesach, learning Prakim Aleph and Beis. So, beginning first with Hilchos Me'ilah, the final chapter, Perek Ches. We're going to be learning some halachas regarding working on consecrated fields, consecrated orchards, all behemshuk to that we learned yesterday over Shabbos. We're going to be learning that the workers were never paid ma'os hegdish because you cannot deconsecrate the money over labor, which is a non-tangible. We'll see exactly how did they get paid. We're going to learn b'chlal that when we make contracts with workers to build, that we used to use 2 measurings, one to make the contract and one for when they delivered their merchandise, making sure, as we'll explain, that they will never inadvertently be moyel behegdish. And there's a very powerful siyum that the Rambam writes here, which is really the siyum of the whole Sefer Avodah, how roi la'adam le'yisbain and the mishpatei ha'torah hakadoshah, that we have to try to understand that which we can. However, the Rambam is going to write here at the siyum of Avodah that korbanos are part of the Torah that are completely beyond human comprehension. And God willing, when we come to the siyum, we'll point out that the words that the Rambam writes concerning korbanos in Sefer Avodah is very different than the same words that Rambam writes when we're going to make the siyum on the next Sefer, on Sefer Karbanos. There he writes that we could have some understanding in the inyan of Karbanos, and we're going to share a Gavaldik Vart of the Rebbe, how to reconcile this apparent contradiction. Let's start with the 8th chapter. Perek Ches Me'ilah has 8 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Hapoyalim shehem oisen behegdish, workers that are working on consecrated fields, orchards. And we have psukim in the Torah, befedish, right? That kisavi bekenem beyacha v'achalta novim. These the lashon kenafshecha savecha, right? In other words, if I work in your field, then in a certain window I'm allowed to eat of your product, but that will not be the case by hegdish. Lo yochlu migroigeroi shel hegdish, and groigeros is just a mashal. Because fakert, the pasuk says, the right of a worker to eat at certain times from the product on which he's working is only if it's bekerem reyecha and not bekerem shel hegdish. And furthermore, ve'im achlu mamish, that's me'ilah ma'alu eloma elom. In the case where a hegdish made up, that they will be paying also mizoynois as part of the salary. So what do you do? So hegdish will give these workers the may mizoynois gavaldik halacha beis hadosh karshine hegdish, a person who's threshing. The example here is karshinim. So here, normally again, there's a lav in the Torah loisachsoin pashas kiseitze shor bedishay. So when you're threshing it, you're not allowed to muzzle the animal that's doing the threshing. That's only if it's not hegdish product. You muzzle it. And that is interpreted to mean adayish haroi loy. But since it's hegdish is not the roi loy, it's hegdish. So we are allowed to muzzle the animal. Ein mechalolin es hegdish al hamalacha ela al hamaois. This is extremely important. So first of all, work that was already done is not a tangible. If there would be money belonging to the Berek Habayis, think about it, and they would give it to workers. So when there is a tangible item, so the money, the kedusha of the money will go over to the thing that will now be in the domain of hegdish, and whoever receives the money can keep the money. But when you're paying a person for the work that they did, can't pay them with money of hegdish, because the kedusha that the money has will be mischal over what? And furthermore, the labor that they did, think about it, is already consecrated. In other words, if I have an object that's kadosh and I want to be machalal it, I have to have something else that's chulin. If the other thing is also already kodesh, it's already taken up. There is no room for it to absorb the kedusha. So therefore, first of all, you can't pay them with money of hegdish. So exactly what are we going to do over here? So the Rambam writes the following: Umen she'asa melacha behegdish, in the value of a money. So let's say hegdish. Rambam is giving an example where they don't have money; they have things. Someone gave to the Bedek Habayis an animal, and let's say the animal is worth a money. The animal is worth a money, but again, you cannot give them that animal. Or you can give these workers a talus of hegdish, which has the value of the money taka owed to them. First, hegdish has to remove the kedusha of that article. So you actually take stam money, chulin money. We're speaking about the case here that hegdish is not going to give them money. Hegdish is going to give them a thing. And hegdish, the gizbara make a statement, and they're machalal the kedusha of the animal over money. Now that this animal is no longer holy, we're speaking about obviously if the uman would like to get paid with that article. And now, so think what's going on over here. So now the worker has an animal that is kadosh, correct? Hegdish has money. I'm sorry, it's 1 second. The animal was mischal. The worker has money that's not consecrated. If Hegdish wants to get that animal, then they give him money from the temple's account. Now, the money that they're giving is Kaddish, but the animal is not. Yachap. So now the Kedusha of the money is going to be transferred to the animal. Hegdish is going to keep their animal, which is reconsecrated, and now the worker will have money that's chulin. Because you have to go through these steps, and you can't use the labor that they did as the item upon which to be machalo the animal.
Where are they getting the unconsecrated animal from?
No, Hegdish has a consecrated animal. Fakir, someone donated to Hegdish an animal.
So how are they using that to pay him?
Huh?
How are they using that as pay?
No. So they're writing, so they're going to take money. They're going to take money that is chulin money. Hegdish will take now chulin money, and they're going to put the kedusha of the animal over the money. So now they have holy money, and they have an unconsecrated animal. The animal they're going to give to that worker. The worker now got paid. The worker now has an animal that's not holy. You with me, Danny? No, it's the exchange. Let me ask you a question. When someone is magdish an animal to hegdish, what do they do with it? Think about it. What do they do with it? They don't need that animal. They don't need your talus. They need my talus. You understand? They're going to exchange it over money. So that worked perfect. So they take money. The money is chulin. They already transferred the kedusha over the money.
Yeah, but I'm saying if the Beis HaMikdash has a garment and they sell it and now they have money, you're saying that money is now chulin?
Of course.
That money then because the hegdish that belongs to the Bedek Habayis? I'm just not seeing where they get chulin anything.
Danny, if the money was not given to hegdish as an act of hegdish, if I did not donate money to the Beis HaMikdash, if the gizbar has money, he uses you use money that's not kadosh to be machalal the animal. Okay, halachadal. When you're building the actual mikdash, you're not going to use the raw material that's already mukdash. And when you build it, you beferish don't want for the items that you are using to be consecrated as they are being used. You have to actually beferish have in mind that the items that you are using should remain chulin. It's only after the building is ready do you then consecrate the items. Why? Because people are not malachim. We learned about this yesterday. Think about it. When you are building something, you might sit down on the bricks. When you get tired, you might have hana from the shade. You don't want to create a scenario that you're working with kodesh. You work with hegdish, you can come to meila. You understand? And the solution is all of the raw materials continuously remain chayil. Only after it's fully built in, then will the donor declare these items now are being magdish. He's just giving another example, Danny. You ask that. By the way, Danny, how does the Hegdish have chulin money? Here's one of the ways. So money that was already mukdash will now be used. You're going to take the kedusha of the money. You're going to put it into the building. Now Hegdish will own money that's chulin. Great. And by the way, they can use this money to pay the workers. So echt good. When do you have to make sure that the raw materials is not already pre-consecrated? That's if you have a big building project. But if you only have to do a little thing, you have to make a little refurbishment, and you only need wood, and all of the wood will be used up today, here people can be careful knowing that they're working with Kodesh money. Like in other words, every case, if there's only a small refurbishment to be done, we're not concerned by using items that are already consecrated prior to you building them into the building. Now, halacha hey. You're making a contract with workers to build. So I know that, sometimes you pay them per job, correct? Sometimes you pay them per square footage. Even how do you make the cheshbon? We charge $400. Maybe now here with inflation, $800 per square foot. There's a number per square foot. What are we concerned? They're measuring ropes that they used in the times of Chazal. It's not a stick; it's a rope. It could be that it's stretched more. Could be it's stretched less. You have to make sure that they are delivering at least what they promised to deliver. Because if they deliver even a little bit less, they got paid to build 1 square foot, but they gave 1 square foot minus epis, then they're getting overpaid. That's called me'ilah. So how do you do that? And they know that lechatchila, they know that they made the calculations of the footage in a way where they will for sure be delivering more than they promised to deliver. And if you remember that there's an amma is a measure, and there's an amma bas chamisha tvachim, there's an amma bas shisha tvachim. The emes, if you remember, even 6 tvachim, there are 2 amas. There's ones where the tvachim, your hands are a little bit loose, and then you have the tvachim that are tight. We're not going into that. We're going into the 5 into the 6. So pois kimi moem kach v'kach amma v'kach v'kach sela. In other words, when they make up the price per amma, so they're making up how much they will charge to give you the smaller amma. But amma bas esrim etz. 1 amma, 20 etzba, that's 5 tvachim, right? 5 tvachim. But when they actually deliver, and now that Beis Din is going to actually write out the check. So first they're measuring to see if they got how many amas did we get. Now they're going to purposefully, everyone knows what they're doing. They're using the rope. Moishchin lohen mashabanu. Moishchin u'machashvu lohen ba'ama gedoyla. Amma gedoyla is 1 amma is 24 its voice. In other words, 6 tvachim. So it is for sure they're getting underpaid. For sure. They know that. And they're not getting overpaid. And the Rambam explains why that happens. Now, will it change when we build a third Beis HaMikdash? It could be. We're speaking about, that's the Chazal. Meshicha is, they used to have ropes. If you remember by Eiduvin, if I remember correctly, you can only measure 50 amas at a time, if I remember correctly, because it was ropes. And even then, if you remember, winter, summer, they were always concerned. Today you have lasers. Today you have meduyik. They didn't have it then. So they didn't have sticks. They had the yardstick. They had ropes. So there can be, again, all of that is to prevent a possibility that they inadvertently, they might deliver a little bit less than what they promised, which means they're getting overpaid. They're getting overpaid the mile behech. And that resolves it. Halacha vov. Tanai beizenu sheyiu hakoyanim ne'oisim b'melach u'be'etzim, when they are eating the karbonos bechelkon. That they are allowed to do. And that's not called me'ilah. It's Tanai Beis Din. Sometimes we have the words leiv Beis Din masna aleim. That's very important. Because from the outset, it was not fully mugdish. It was for God, for the use in the temple, and for the kohen. That which they are allowed to use is when they're eating, let's say, basar chatos, sar ashim, they're eating kachim, but they're not allowed to take that melech. It's not stam, you can take it for yourself. Now another halacha zayin, melech she'al gabe ha'eved once the melech is put on a lid, so that melech, in other words, really it should be offered on the mizbeach. So you don't say tonight based on who that they can take some salt off that avid and put it on their portion. That they can't do anymore. Because that was already designated to go on the mizbeach. However, the salt that they put on the ramp, if you remember, they would put salt on the ramp so it should not be slippery. Here, the din is bechlal ein mo'alin bahem. They were completely not subject to me'ilah, and the rule is, these are salts that are left over, salt that falls. And the rule is, if you remember, that anything that's not ra'ui for anything is not subject to me'ilah. And this is the final, so to say, halacha part. And now we're learning, as the Rambam always does, at the end of a siyum, we're going to have actually a very long halacha. That's awesome. Halacha ches. Final halacha, chavra, siyum, sefer, avodah. Ra'ui la'adam lizbainin b'mishpatei ha'tleid ha'kadosh. It's appropriate for people to contemplate and to meditate, trying the best we could to understand the logic behind the mishpatim. Stam lohayr hashgacha pratis that we're learning this on Sunday, Parshas Chaye Sarah, and God willing, this week when we learn the Torah Oid, the last Maimed in Torah Oid is exactly about this topic. How important it is to grasp the Torah al pi seichel. The Alter Rebbe writes a Maimer explaining that the learning of the nigla of Torah is the main purpose for why we came down into this world. Amazing. Because the Pnimius HaTorah, since there's so much Kedusha there, you grasp it with holiness. You don't even grasp it with logic to dafka understand it. However, that which you cannot understand, we don't understand the motivation, then, God forbid, don't treat that lightly. And this is a beautiful lashon that we find regarding Har Sinai. It's don't break up to ascend. And the way, perhaps, what the Rambam means is that you can have mystical understanding of the mitzvahs. We have mystical understandings, but don't only, celebrate the mystical part of it. Don't do that. You have to understand the halach. And if you don't understand the tam for the halacha, the way it's given down here, lamata, okay, if you can't understand, you can't understand. And al yehei kal be'enov, but try to until you can. Then yifretz boy. People that make the mitzvahs only ruchnis the kinyanim, that can lead people to stop to keeping the practice. In other words, there is the spirit of the law, of course, that's easier to understand. We're speaking about the actual law. And to understand the halacha b'poyel mamash and the reasons, the logical reasons behind halacha, if you could. In divrei choil, if something doesn't make sense, you don't do it. God forbid, that's not to Torah. We are makabel, nasa. But there's an inyan to try to understand. And then he writes, that Oma in eitzim ba'avanim, or afar earth and eifer and ashes. If there was only a verbal connection between the master of the world and this item, and to the point that if someone does not give it the proper respect, and even worse, misappropriating it, more alba, and even if he did it b'shoigig, he needs a kapara. And I appreciate, guys, he can be mile in a pruta's worth, one pruta's worth. And not only the cat and the chaimish, he has to bring a carbon that's worth 2 saloim. It's kal v'chaim le mitzvahs. Shachak aklanu hakadosh baruch hu shelo yivait adam bahem just because shelo yeda tamam and v'lo yechape devarim asher lo yikein al Hashem. Don't try to make up something that's not correct. You don't need a reason. V'lo yechashiv emachshavtei kedivrei achayil. Don't think about them the way you think about all ordinary matters. And harei nema b'Torah, according to Pasuk in Kedoshim, ushmartem es kol chukaisai. So you have Shmira and Asiyah, and you have Chukim and you have Mishpatim, and on that order, Shmira is not to violate, Asiyah is to do. Chukim ka Mishpatim, because the Rambam is speaking to people that are logical people. So when you understand something, you do it with enthusiasm. You understand what you're doing. The Torah says, do Chukim with the same Geshmak, even though you don't understand. For Asiyah Yedua, which means Vihi Sheyaseh HaChukim. So the doing in the pasuk is to do it. How does the Rambam tie Shmira? Shmira means sheyizor b'hem v'lo yidam Hashem b'chusim min hamishpatim. Shmira means don't treat it with less reverence than mishpatim just because you don't understand. Now, hamishpatim ema mitzvah shetamim galui. Not only do we understand the reason, but how they affect the world. It's obvious that they give a good effect on the world. For example, the Isur of Gazel and Shvichas Damim, Kibbut Avayim, Chukim refer to the mitzvah she'ein tamam yodua. Stam lohoyer, the Rebbe's medayik, that even by Chukim, the Rambam writes she'ein tamam yodua, which means there is a tam. Elama, we don't know the tam. Rashi in Chumash, Taichas Chukim, those mitzvahs that don't have a tam. Okay. Wow. Laharer b'hem means not to try to understand it. After you conclude it, you don't understand it, don't be maharer, don't minimize it. Right? One's natural inclination is going to be confronting. Why do you have to do it? And the Ummah Ha'olam, had they not challenged you, you're not Moshiven Aleim, going Isur B'sar Chazer, and Ubasar B'chalav, the Egla Rufa, Upara Duma, Usoyer HaMishtaleach, the Kamor Hoyadavan HaMelech Mitztayir Al Haminin, that sometimes Nebuch were from the Jewish people, and the Goyim, Shoyim Moshiven Al Achukim, they would always have challenges on that which they couldn't understand. The Chol Zman Shoyoroitvim Oisei B'tzeshuvais HaSheker. When people feel they have to have the answer, the downside is that they make up wrong answers. That's the Aharis La'alas al Hashem. If you don't know, say you don't know. Not knowing is a million times better than giving the wrong reason. So the more they would try to make up false answers, and that's the meaning of the pasuk Taflu alai sheker zeidim. Ani b'cholev etzer pikodach. In other words, the more they were giving falsehoods in explaining the mitzvahs, and that's not the reason. He didn't have the reason. Adarabah. So it inspired him to have a greater dveikus, to do it even though we don't understand. Kol mitzvah sheker the funi, and then he cried out to God, God help me, Yosreini. Now that the Rambam wrote that, guys, these are the key words here. Clearly, and that, as the Rambam writes, that she'ein tamon yodua. Now, before we go on, just to share one nekuda, if you're going to look at the end of Sefer Karbanos, which, by the way, is a much shorter Sefer than Avodah, we're going to get there, God willing, soon. The Rambam mamish begins to give reasons for some Karbanos, and everyone points out a contradiction. Here in Sefer Avodah, writing that when it comes to Chukim, ein tamon yodua, and keep it with the same geshmak. And he writes, Kol HaKorbanos Mechlal HaChukim. That means there's no tam. The tam is not Yudua. How is it possible that in the next Sefer he begins giving tamim? And the Rebbe says something moedic. The word avodah, Sefer avodah is avdus. Avdus means doing what God wants, whether we understand it or not. So the parts of Korbanos that are ununderstandable is being celebrated in Sefer avodah. The word korban comes from the word kiruv. Getting close, I can get close to you when I know you. If I don't know you, if I don't understand you, that is an impediment to getting close. So after a yid first, Nasser, is an Eved Hashem, I'm doing it even though I don't understand it, then Hashem opens up our minds and we are able, we're zoicha, to even with our seichel anushi, to understand a little bit, which will allow us to get even closer to God. First Avdus, and then getting close. Nasiv and Ishma. Beautiful. And again, we hashgacha pratis. What did we learn last week? Or Parshas Lech Lecha. That Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, not that he didn't have Amunah, but we have to merit having our hold over the Holy Land. Chumash Rashi. And God told him that what is the schus that we will always have dominion over Eretz Yisrael? The schus HaKorbanos, which, by the way, also means that even after there's an Isur Bamois, at least if we can't do it begashmias, kol ha'toyre, kol ha'loyme toyras oilam. In other words, the learning of the karbanos, and that includes same karbanos every day, before Shachris and before Mincha. That is why we're Zoichet to have Eretz Yisrael. B'shvil avodas, like the whole world is standing. Shabasiyas hachukim and the hamishpatim. Now, that which you could understand. Zoichin hayishorim l'chayon l'habam. And v'hedima toiret tzivay alachukim. Shenemar apasik and achrim ois. Ushmartem es chukoysev es mishpata yashiyasa oiso adam b'chai bohem. Chukoyse and them mishpata. And that gives us life. Life of this world and life of the world to come. And on this we say, Brich Rachmana Desayan, Nigmar Sefer Shmini, Be'ezra Shin Dalad Yud, Wuhu Sefer Avoidam, Hilchoisa Teisha, Uparakav Chamisha, Vetishim, Be'elohem, always Klal, Prato Klal, we go to the Klal at the end, Beis Abchira, Hilchas Beis Abchira Shmene Prakim, Hilchas Klei Amigdash Asara Prakim, Hilchas Bias Amigdash Tisha Prakim, Hilchas Isura Mizbeach Shiva Prakim, Hilchas Masa Korbanois, Tisha Asar Prakim, Hilchas Tividim Umasafen Asar Prakim, Hilchas Psuli Amagdashum Tisha Asar Prakim, and Hilchas Avodas Yom Kippurim Chamisha Prakim, Hilchas Meila Shmoina Prakim, Eden Mazel Tov, and now
Mazel Tov,
right? That we connect the ending and the beginning. So now we are starting the 9th Sefer from the Yudalit Sfarim, and many have the Girsa B'Shem Hashem Keil Oilam. That Rambam wrote that in prior to each one of the Sfarim. Then the Rambam always, as we mentioned, he quotes a pasuk dafka from Ksuvim, as we explained the Rebbe's Vart when we learned Hakdama. Tikain Tifilosi Ketoides Lefanecha Masas Kapai Minchas Arif, which is quite amazing. The koyach of our prayer. So you have davening. Davening is Ketoides, the higher level of connection. And Masas Kapai, the lifting of one's hands during davening, that's in the place of a mincha that's brought in the afternoon. For who Sefer Chi, Hilchos of Sheish, that's a relatively shorter Sefer, V'zeu Siduran, beginning with the first carbon, and that makes sense. The first carbon is a carbon Pesach. That was the first carbon that the Yidden brought in the desert. Many Rishonim understand that when a ger brings a carbon, it's also like a carbon Pesach. That is what makes us a Yid. Hilchos Chagiga, Hilchos B'chaydos, Hilchos Shigagos, Hilchos Mechusrei Kapara, and the final one will be Hilchos Temura, beginning with Hilchos Carbon Pesach. Says the Rambam, Yesh B'chlal and Sheish Esrei Mitzvahs, Arba Mitzvahs Asay, Shtei Esrei Mitzvahs Lois Asay, V'zeu Pratan, Aleph, Chavra Lishchait HaPesach B'zmane, Beis, Shaloi Lisbayach Haisai, Al Chametz means while you are in possession of the Chametz. We'll see details about this soon. Number 3, Shaloi Talin a Murav. Number 4, Lishchait Pesach Sheni, whenever there's such an obligation. Number 5, Lechol Psar HaPesach Al Matzah. Al Matzah means together with Matzah and together with Marad B'lei Chamishos. Vav Lechol Psar Pesach Sheni, same way. Al Matzah is Umaroid B'lei Chamishos Al HaChodesh Hasheni. Zayin Shaloi Loichal No. No means slightly roasted. No doesn't mean raw. You're not allowed to have it slightly roasted, nor can you have it cooked in water. Forget about the issue of kachay kalim. You have to keep it in Yerushalayim. Yeah, we know that already. There's another thing, as we'll see soon, that there has to be chaburos of people, and you have to eat it with your chabura. You can't leave. You can't remove the meat from your chabura. 9, a mumar cannot partake of the carbon pesach. 10, not letoishav, right? A ger toishav, nor to someone who works for you, a hired worker. Yud Aleph, even a yid who's an auto. Yud Beis, yishbar by etzem, unique halach. Yud Gimel, yishbar etzem bepesach sheni. Yud Dalet, yashir mimenu laboiket. There's a very small amount of time that you can eat it. I'm saying small. I know that many korbanos is day and night, but the korban pesach cannot be eaten by day. You can only begin eating it at night, but you only have that night. Tezvav shalayashim pesach sheni laboiket, and the final tezayim shalayashim mipsar chagigas arba asar. As we'll learn, aside of the obligation of bringing a chagiga of every yontiv, but there was another chagiga that sometimes was brought to make sure that the korban pesach is eaten al hasoiva, as we will see. That follows the regular laws of Chagiga, which allows you to have it 2 days and 1 night, 14th, the night of the 15th, the day of the 15th. Don't leave it on Yom HaShlishi. Ubir mitzvah selu b'prakim elo, and Perek Aleph will have 20 halachas, and we will be learning the basic rules of the Korban Pesach. We're going to be learning the Pesach was nishchat on shalosh kitos. We're going to be learning some basic halachas regarding Ein Shvus B'Mikdash, how we needed to rely on that Ein Shvus B'Mikdash to properly bring the Korban Pesach, as we'll see. Sometimes Erev Pesach is Friday, sometimes Erev Pesach is Shabbos, etc. And let's start with the first halach. Halach Aleph. Perek Aleph, halach Aleph. Mitzvahs asay lishchoit haPesach ba'arba'a asar l'chodesh Nisan after midday, after Chatzos. Another rule: the ein shechten ella, either kvasim, these are lambs within their year, or izim, goats with bilvad, and they have to, the gender has to be male, and their age has to be ben shana. Another rule: the echad ha'ish, the echad ha'isha chayavim b'mitzvah zu. Yeah, the rule is mitzvah sasei shazman gadam anashim aperturais. But the Gemara tells us that since the Torah writes b'michsas nefashois, not b'michsas anoshim, the count of the men. Nefashois means nefashois, people that are alive. That is to be include men and women. Halacha beis. Umi shebitul mitzvah zu bezodim. Meaning, v'avar yom arba asar v'loy hikrif. V'hu loy tameh. V'loy b'derech rechoika, as we'll define soon. Harei ze chayiv kares. This is one of the 2 only positive commandments for which you're chayiv kares. V'im bitla b'shgaga. Here, pater. What does the word pater mean? So when it comes to violating a negative commandment, if you violated b'shgaga, kol shezdoinei kares, so you chayiv b'shgaga gachatos kavua. Not so over here. Taka Yechayev Kares, but since you're not violating a negative commandment, here, if a person b'shoigig didn't bring it, not only are they not Chayev Kares, but it means there is no chatos for a shoigig b'negei Pesach. Halacha Gimel. Ein shoichten es haPesach elo bo azora kishar kach. And af b'shas heter habamois lo yehoyu makriven es haPesach bebamas yachid. Another chol hamakriv es haPesach bebamas yachid loikem ki ilu hikrivu b'shuk. Shenemer, as it says in Parshas Re'ei, lo yisuchal isbayich es haPesach or es haPasach be'achad she'orecha. Meaning anywhere outside the azara. Pnei Shmuel lamdu shezu azara l'shechet bebamas yachid. Even the Shas Heter Bamas. As we learned this already. You know, it's the Korbanos, you have to know how to understand the Korban Pesach. Is it a Korban Yachid? Is it a Korban Sibur? And here we consider it outside of the permit of Bama. Halacha Daled. Shchitas HaPesach, like we said, has to be after Chatzos, to the point. The Im Shchati Kodim Chatzos, Pasul. Another rule. The Ein Shechten Oisei Ela Ma'achar Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim. After the afternoon Tamid. And Achar Shemakirin Torah Shel Ben Arbayim. And like the Rambam keeps on writing, the last step was Achar Shemakirin Anedos. It was when you finish the Tmidim, now Maschil and Lishkotas Apsachim at Soif Hayoim. Ve'im Shechatay Achar Chatzois, but they did it. Kodim Tam Shel Ben Arbayim, which means for sure prior to the Ketairas, prior to the Hatavis Nedos, post facto Kosh. However, try to rectify. How can you rectify? Just because you did the act of the shchita, if someone is going to be memaris b'dam, shech the tamid shel bein arbayim, have the zrika of the tamid done first, and then throw the dam of the Pesach. Kosher, but v'yio echad memaris b'dam ha-Pesach. Achi yizorik dam ha-tamid, v'achar kach yisrek dam ha-Pesach achrov. However, even if that was not done, in nizrak dam ha-Pesach, prior to even the whole avodah of the tamid, also, post facto, bidi evet kosher. What? Chatzois is essential. Halacha. Now, boho, you like his eyes, chametz b'reshusai. The guy who did the shchita, like, and that's the meaning of the pasuk in Mishpatim. Lo yisbach al chametz dam zivchi, meaning shelo yisbach haPesach, when you own, when there is chametz in your possession, not in your pocket, over there in your city. If you didn't get rid of it, you're violating this law. Now, who violates this law? Not only the owner of the carbon, everyone involved. Echad HaShoichet, and even the kohen, the Echad HaZoyrek HaSadam. The echad, the other kind that's makted the imurim. Im hoy b'reshus echad mehem, oy b'reshus echad mibnei achabura. As we'll see soon, the din of Menuyav, that will be the topic of the next chapter. That you have to pre-shchita designate who will be part of it. If any of these chevra, if they have kezayis chametz b'shas hakravasa in their possession, I don't care where it is, anywhere, hareza loika, but the Pesach is valid. Pesach kosher. Halachavav. Dama Pesach ton shvicha. As we learned in Sefer Avodah, so you have zrika. Zrika sadam means that you're standing a little bit removed from the altar, so you do a throwing motion. And Dama Pesach dafkenat, pouring it means that you are pouring it benachas on the wall of the mizbeach over a yisoid, keneged a yisoid. And like we learned, two sides had a yisoid in its entirety. The tzad mizrach, the tzad tzofain, and the tzad ma'irav. And tzad mizrach and the tzad doroim only had, according to the Rambam, one amma of a yisoid. So you can't pour it basically in almost half of the mizbech because it's not keneged ha-yisoid. After you do the shvichas adam, then you skin it. And then you rip open the stomach, the belly, to take out the imurim, and then maktirin oisan chalavin. The chalav of each carbon has to be offered individually. You don't mix them together. And now the owners of the zevach, they take their pesach with the hide, and they can bring it anywhere in Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, maybe in Yerushalayim. Nothing is done yet. Okay. But they did not burn it, and it was too late. So the din is, and this will happen only in the morning because halavim can be brought day and night. We'll see details on that in a moment. Because of the rule, not doing something means a non-action. Wait, who
gets that avera?
Huh?
Who's the one that left it over? It would be the kohen, no?
The kohanim, sure.
Okay, but I mean, if you're the owner, it's not your fault, right? I'm just trying to picture this.
No, it's not about fault. Correct. Because that's the general rule. That even though the dam has to be done before shchita, but the chalev can be at night, but not always. Which is quite amazing, which means that you shech the carbon Pesach on Shabbos. Now we learned this when it came to the carbon tamid. Can you offer the chalev of Shabbos on a Yom Tov? The answer is yes. So even though the night, I know it's Matzah Shabbos, but it's Pesach, not a problem. Chel be Shabbos could even be Yom Tov. However, im chal arba asaliyos b'choil. Think about that. Any weekday, the night of the 15th is Yom Tov. You have this cloud that you're not allowed to be maktiv. Chalev of a carbon that was done on a weekday, you cannot do it on Yom Tov. So, and by the way, Danny, that's a good thing because that means that almost always the chalavim were burned prior to Shkia. So, like the owners would know if it didn't happen. You understand? Because at night you're not there anymore. At night you're going home to do mitzoiled. The same pressure they had to throw the dam, the same pressure they had to bring up all of the chalavim. And don't forget that Rambam says you can't even mix them together. So there was huge avoid on the kohanim. There was huge pressure. And therefore, we'll see in a moment, shchita ksheda bezor was really used at a Pesach because we needed the kohanim to do whatever it is that only they can do. Halacha 9. HaPesach nishchat b'shol l'shkitas dafke. Now, by the way, this is also not. I say dafke. It's a din of lechatchila. If they brought it in one kat, it's going to be post facto kosher. Shenemar v'shachtu oisai. Look at the diuk. Koil kahal, one word of a congregation. Adas, another word for a congregation, and even kahal adas Yisrael, kahal eded Yisrael means lechatchila ein toichasin b'shloisha b'nei adam b'chol ka. Finished. 3. Another detail: the ein toichasin b'shloisha b'nei adam b'chol kat v'kat. How do we get to the number 30? Because since what's a kahal, what's an edam? Eid a minyan. So the Torah writes, call Eidin Yisrael, 3. So on one hand, we say 3 groups, but we want for each group to have a number of 3. So 30 in every group. Now, what were to happen?
I'm sorry, one second. Rabbi, 3 groups we're talking about of all Klal Yisrael are divided into 3, or within?
Everyone was coming.
So what are you talking about 30? If it's a third of the people, you have thousands of people. What's this 30 number?
So you had this kasha number. Look, if all the Yidden that came are 50. God forbid, this is not happening with Mashiach. This happened in the past when there was a division in the Malchus and there were centuries, Yerovam ben Avat, and they didn't allow Jews to go to the Beis HaMikdash. There were certain times that there was religious persecution. It's not, now if you have 50, you did 50, you can't divide 50 into 3 groups of 3. Right, 30, 30, 30, and it should be 90, not 50, but you can still do it. 50, you can still resolve it. How? Because first you have 30 that enter, and they do the Meshoichet. And then only 10 leave. You understand? If 30 went, so there's 20 people that didn't bring it yet. But then, you have to, the Yidden that did it have to have Avos Yisrael, even though that they fulfilled their obligation, they have to stay there. No, it's only 10 leaves. So now you only have 20 in the Azara, and another 10 go in. And then but halacha Yud Aleph, if to begin with, God forbid, there was less than 50. Because, like we said, you have to have shalosh kitos. However, the im shachatu kosher. Now, the im shachatu kol basachas, like we mentioned, the whole thing is a din of lechatchila. Good. Next rule, next topic. Ketzat nishchat. How did it happen? So nichnesar kat rishoinu. Achet esmali azara. They would block the gates. If I remember correctly from Psachim, that a miracle happened during the times that we merited miracles, and the gates closed by themselves. When, times of Shimon HaTzadik and Babayis Rishon. And then, or not manually, we closed it. And listen what's happening. Then they would repeat the halal. Take 2. And still they were so expedient, even when there were millions of people. That's how quick everything went. Halacha Yud Beis. Al kol kriya, toikin sholosh tkiyas b'chatzoytzreis, which is tkiya truot tkiya. And hoil the ein loy nisachim letkoy b'shas nisuch. That's why they would blow it b'shas shchita. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hakoyhanim oimdim shuray shurais. The way this thing worked quick is by not having anyone needing to walk anywhere. There were rows of koyhanim, and now we're going to focus on the dam. Logic dictates, like we mentioned before, that whenever you have to burn the chalavim on that day prior to Shkia, they made a similar system for the chalavim. But instead of people walking, they would hand over one to the other. Now the Beis HaMikdash owned the mizrakim, the bowls that were used to receive the dam. Some of them were silver, some of them were gold. It wasn't all of the same metal. So you had everything was being used, and mizrakei kesef, mizrakei zov. Shura shkola kesef. The shura shkola zov zov. So they made sure that they kept those colors, they kept those metals aligned. Now, who got the silver? Who got the gold? Sfardim Ashkenazim, no, not that way. The silver and the gold, just to know that kesef is tzaddik and zov is balei tshuva. Maybe there was a rhyme and a reason. And they didn't. They made sure one thing, that every row kept their color, kept their metal. That added to the beauty. And as we learned in the previous sefer, and here, because when you put blood down for too long of a time, the dam will congeal. And by the way, shachad ha-shoichet is not a kohen. Now, when there were chamishim yidden, you can have kohanim shachad. We're just saying there were so many kohanim, all hands on deck. So whoever shechted. But now, by mitzvahs kohanis from Kabbalah veil, the kibbutz kohen, and this made things go quicker. The chaveiro lechaveiro. I want to add another detail. The Gemara says in Psachim there was a time that there were millions of karbanos. If I remember, crazy numbers, and the Azara was filled with dam. And the Gemara was speaking about the issue of chatzitza, and the solution for chatzitza was that they had these pillars that were built into the floor of the Azara. And the Kohanim were standing on those pillars. Because if you would be standing on the floor, I forgot the Lashon, the blood went until your knees. Now you put this with this Rambam, it works. You think all of the Kohanim had such good balance to be running back and forth on these sticks, not to splash into the blood? No one walked anywhere. They were standing. They were just passing the cups of the dam one to the other. It worked. They also did it to have everyone involved. And like we said, koroiv, not zrika, shvicha. These are the only three korbanos: Pesach, Bchor, and Meiser. Why we learned only one shvicha. No, finished. And now umekabel mizrak echad mali v'achakach mazer saneka. So it's going back and forth. And the seder is first the kohen received the mali, then he gave back the reikon. That and not the other. Everything was mesuded.
And then where'd the empty ones go?
It went back to the Makom Ashchita. In other words,
them out?
They didn't have to rinse them out.
So then wouldn't you be mixing blood?
They're not mixing blood. I don't think that's called mixing blood. They poured the whole thing. I don't think the Shirayim was a problem.
Well, Rabbi, there was no problem because there were two different sizes. One for a smaller animal and one for the cows. So what's the problem if you take a...
There are no cows here. There were only kvasim and izim, and we're using the same cups. So I don't think that time to rinse it up. No, let's go back. The toilet and then they would hang the animals and they would skin it. And then, like we mentioned, they would rip open the belly. No, there's another detail, and that is that some parts of the innards are filled with waste. Remember that whole thing? So that, and you have to, the kishka, you have to squeeze that out. And then, and it was after they were cleaned out, and then melicha, and almost always it had to be done before shkia. Again, interestingly, the Rambam doesn't write that they made these rows. I think if there was a need to do it, they did it that way. Now, how do you hang it? The Rambam meaning to ask that they were not, the Beis Hamikdash did not have fixed hooks for this number of karbonis. So there was a certain infrastructure that could tolerate a lot. There were iron pegs that were affixed in the walls and they were affixed in the pillars that were going to die, right? However, if there wasn't such a fixed hook, peg, so then there was a secondary system, and that is maklois daklim b'chalokim hayasham. They were thin, smooth rods. Maniach al kasefai, and they would have two people facing each other, and they would have a rod from my right shoulder to your left shoulder, and so we have two rods. And on these rods, they would then hang the animal and they would skin it. And again, being that we only had Behema Dakas, right, Mayan, it was only Kvasim and only Izim, and they were only Ben Shana, and we had a merit to witness a Shechita a couple of months ago together. Small animals, it's doable, it's not that heavy.
Rabbi, the people standing, did that have to be Kohanim or could be any person?
No,
standing with the rods on their shoulders.
No, we can be a peg in the wall, we can be, not a problem. Halacha tells what? Now, when they finish, so this is the first cut. Now, what does Shalom mean? It means dam, for sure dam. And again, if it's a Yom Chayil, I think it also means the Haklara Semurim. That's what you have to bring on the Mizbech. Then they opened up the doors, and the Yotzis Kater Shleina, and the Nichmas Shniya. Yotzis Shniya, and Nichmas Shlishis. Kamaisha Shleina, Kachmaisha Shniya, Shlishis. Shomu Kachlishis, V'Yotzas. Then, don't think that they didn't wash it before. Before they washed it when they needed to. It was, you can decide. But when they finished the final cut, you have to wash out the azor. Now, halacha tazayin. Chol arba asaliyos b'Shabbos. K'maseu b'chol kach maseu b'Shabbos. It's doiche Shabbos. V'reichtzin es hazor b'Shabbos. Now, you should know that washing out a floor could be an Isur D'Rabbanan. What's Isur D'Rabbanan, guys? Let's go back to Masechta Shabbos. Maybe you'll be mashva gumos. Maybe you'll be mashva gumos. but Ein Shavuos Bamikdash. So She'ein Isur Shavuos Bamikdash.
Also, it's not a dirt floor.
It doesn't matter. So that's the whole issue about sweeping. Let's not get into it. But we spoke about it when we learned the Gemara. Like we paskin that we can sweep today. That's the way, because it's not a dirt floor. The problem is that in the Beis Hamikdash there was not a dirt floor, and the only reason why they were allowed to rinse it out is because Ein Shavuos Bamikdash that we spoke about. Another thing, Ein Shavuos, guys, you have to learn the Siyum of Eruvin to really, in the last few daf, to appreciate the sugya. So many times we said that Ein Shavuos Bamikdash Tzorech Havodah. Here we are broader. We are applying this more broadly. The washing out the floor is not Tzorech Havodah. Isur Shavuos Bamikdash heterhu, not doiche. It's mutter. Okay. Rambam halacha yudzay. En kolechad yechad moilachas pischel beisa b'Shabbos. Now, you guys understand the following: that carrying in Yerushalayim. Remember, forget about the edu, forget about a wall. If you remember, there is no isur doiraisa carrying in Yerushalayim. We learned that in the Gemara. Yerushalayim has a din of a carmelis. But on the other hand, you can't carry in a carmelis midrabanan. When do we say Ein Shavuos Bamikdash? But carrying it home, even though Yerushalayim never has a din of a Reshus Harabim, din or carmelis, you cannot carry a midrabanan in a carmelis. So that you can't do. So when the Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, no one was allowed to carry the Pesach home. So where did they go? Now, Harabayis was surrounded with a wall. There they were allowed to carry. Then the Shnia went and they sat in the area called the Chayil, as we learned in Sefer Avoid and Hilchos Beis Abchira. That area between, there was an area between the Azara and the rest of the Harabayis. And the third, Mamish waited in the Azara. So at least if you went in last, you got to stay in the holiest place longest. And you would have to wait there until Motzoi Shabbos. And everyone has their Pesach. How great was that? And then, after Shabbos, Shchitas HaPesach, and Zrikas Damoy, Michui Karov, the squeezing out of the innards, the Hekter Chalav, all of these things involve the Surei Da'oiraisa. Doesn't matter, Doichem Shabbos. And it's a Pesach, it's a carbon, the Kavol Zman. And that's the key word. Any carbon that it says B'moy Adoi is Doich Shabbos. However, carrying it to bring it to Yerushalayim, and if there is a wart that could be removed, rendering the animal fit, but the removing of this type of blemish with the keli is not allowed to be done. Because there's a big rule that any malacha that could have been done prior to Shabbos is not doiche Shabbos. That's Rabbi Eliezer Demila, right? That whole chapter. Machlokes Tanaim, we paskin ein doichem Shabbos. Shei efshel asaysim koydem Shabbos. Now the im yochalach techi abalte beyodi b'Shabbos, and if you remember that type of unusual activity is not prohibited, then chayter. Then a chayt chafila bekeli, because then it's only a derabanan. The Ein Shavuos Bamikdash klal. Let's go roasting it. The hadachas karav, washing out the innards, not squeezing out the innards. Because now understand something. I just want to remind everyone: if you're going into anything that has to be burned on the mizbeach, dafka that day, then whatever needs to be done is allowed to be done on Shabbos. When you don't need to do it, then you can do it Matzah Shabbos. Halacha Yudches. Shachach v'lo yehi saken. Another example of something that could have been done before. Lo yivienu b'Shabbos. Right? And again, even though you're bringing it in Yerushalayim a carmelis, so what? Can't carry in a carmelis. And this is something that could have been done before. But here there's a solution. What's the solution? Stick the knife in between the horns of the living animal, stick the knife in between the center of the animal, and then you make the animal move. So when the animal is walking, it's carrying for you the knife. Now, what is that called in Shabbos? Machamer. Oh. And then, Umagdish Risham. Magdish Risham means if you already consecrated the animal prior to coming to the Azara, you can't be mishtamesh in kachim. Fine, leave the animal chulin and have the animal carry the knife. So here the heter is machamer kala achayatu, and because of the mitzvah it's mutar. Because you're making use of kachim, alav. So why are you telling me that you're going to be using your animal, you're going to be bringing it into the Beis HaMikdash prior to you consecrating it, but then you're going to be magdish it on Shabbos, which is in itself problematic. Now Rambam says, no, it's not. Any animal that's doiche Shabbos, if the avoid is doiche Shabbos, if shchit is doiche Shabbos, then you can be magdish it on Shabbos. Hoyel v'kvolem zman mukladish v'Shabbos. V'chein magdish adam chagigos b'yom tov ve'eino choishesh. And we're going to get to a whole series of chagiga soon. And the final halach of this perek, halacha chaf, says that Rambam hashoichet es hapesach. And it turns out that the animal was a balmum. Turns out the animal was a treifa. In other words, you did not fulfill your mitzvah. Harei ze shoichet acher, bein b'choil, bein b'Shabbos. And even if meya ze'achar zeh, you have to one. You're going through one of the all treifas. Shoichet v'hoilach, achi yichsharechot. Or in the worst case scenario, you're shoigig, you keep on shachting, your animal is constantly everyone is a treifa. Acha techshach, and then since you didn't violate b'mezid, then v'yitchal l'sheni. And now the Rambam concludes this chapter with words that are very difficult to understand. And I'm right, sharei anusu. Now, guys, you have to know that you don't need an oinus. I'll tell you more than that. We're going to learn that if a person was amazed, and they didn't bring Pesach Rishon, they get to bring the Pesach Sheni. In other words, I know that he was an Anus, but why did the Rambam have to write it? If whoever didn't bring Pesach Rishon brings the Pesach Sheni, that's a big kasha. The simplest answer, which is not complete, but just is that if a person was mazed the Pesach Rishon, and then even if they are an oinus in Pesach Sheni, the Chayiv Kares. The Rambam wants you to know that this person who tried, they kept on shechting animals, everyone turned out to be a treifa. The good thing is that since he is an oinus, so now that v'yitchal Pesach Sheni, if he's a shoigig in Pesach Sheni, he'll never be chayiv kares because there was never a mazid dika violation. In other words, it's not necessary to go to the Sheni to be an anus, but it changes what were to happen if you don't bring the Pesach Sheni. Okay. Are
you saying that if it was a trade for the first time, he should just shut it down and wait till Pesach Sheni?
No. The Rambam says try until Shkia. Go until Shkia. Bring another animal and another animal. When we did our shchit over here, what did the Sheikh tell us? That here in LA, from where he gets his animals, he said up to 75% treifas. I think he said something like that. He told me if you want to make sure that you can have the barbecue, which God helped us, we had anyways. If you call that God helped you, of course, the people wanted to have the barbecue. We were lucky that we got the one. He told me, buy 4. I says, I don't need to buy 4. I just wanted for people to see the shechita. The eating was a bonus that God gave us. In other words, it's shaykh, you buy a carbon, you don't know if it's treifa, you don't know if there's a sirchan dereya, you discover it later. Now imagine if you have 200,000 Jews, I think that was the cheshbon that we're bringing that Pesach the Gemara speaks about. How many animals did you have left in Yerushalayim? Probably none. That means if our group's animal turned out to be a treifa, I'm sure we would have a achrayis, we would have 2, we would have 3. But if all 3 are treif, sometimes, if you can't, you do the best you could until Shkia. Okay, moving on. Perek Sheni is going to begin with another foundational rule. And that is that, don't forget, you cannot leave any of the meat over. Most people are unable to eat up an animal by themselves. So you have to get many people to be pre-designated. That's called to be bimenuyav. They were counted, they were enumerated. This animal is for, and every person has to be pre-designated to partake of this animal. Another rule, people that are going to be part of that minuyim, they have to be people that are able to eat a kazayas. Like, what are we speaking about? Sometimes older people are unable to eat properly. What happens another day? If you have one person that counted himself on 2 different animals, 2 groups, so the din is that he will have to eat from the one that was slaughtered first. And not, I'll decide later. No. And another din, if I include people without your consent. So let's say we have an animal, but you know that there's more than a kazayas for each one of us. So we can include more people. If I want to invite another person, I have to get everyone's permission. And if I don't get your permission, we'll see certain dinim of what will happen if the Bnei Chabura will say, we don't want to have that guy over here. What exactly do you need to do? Chavapedic Beis has 15 halachas, starting with halacha Aleph. Says that Rambam ein shechten as a Pesach, elo lemenuyos. You have to be pre-counted in, pre-shchita. Shenemar, as it says in Boy, tochoisu alaseh, counting. Melamed shemismanin olav, prior to the shechita, the animal has to be alive. Now, the elu hamismanim ala pesach, everyone that was counted on this animal, they are called the bnei chabura. Halacha beis. The yochid sheshachar es pesach la'atzmai. He counted no one in. Well, kasher v'hu sheyiroi le'echol eskuloi. He has to have a good appetite. However, b'chlal u'mishtadlin shelo yishachet lechatchila al yochid. Even if you know that you can handle this animal is very little and you have a big appetite, because it says Ya'asu oisoi, they loshem rabin. So you're counting in people. You can't have people that are not roi lechel, as the Rambam will explain. Or a cotton, or a zakein, or a choyle. So like this. Im yochol lechol kazayis, not a problem. Not a problem. Now I want you to know, as we learned in the previous chapter, that the michsas nefashos is to be marbe nashim. The Gemara says the michsas nefashos is also including a cotton. A cotton is not a bar chiyuva. But if you, as a father, you want to count your son in, there's no problem, because the Torah doesn't say anoshim; it says nefashos. A minor is a nefesh, but he has to be someone who's able to eat. It's all about able to eat a kazayis. The baby is 2 months, he's a year old, barely beginning to eat. He can't eat a kazayis. Now here we don't use the ish to exclude ktanim. We don't use the ish to exclude nashim. Now that they were included from the fashos. This is about achloi. Now filu chabura shel meya. The ein echad mehem yochel lechol kazayis. So then, ein shoichten aleihem. We want to make sure that everyone is able to eat. Halacha dal. Now, women can be counted, but here there's an issue of modesty of how do you include them. The ein oisim chabura that includes both nashim and avadim, or kanim and avadim. Mipnei kalu shetia beineim. Aval oisim chabura only of women, even by Pesach Sheni, or only avadim. So I want to say like this, what did people do? If you have families, some people, you have large families, you do it for the family. But once you start mixing, then you separate, you segregated the genders. The shechten alaktanim sheyu mechlal b'nei chabura. However, loy shetia chabura kol ktanim. Why? Like we mentioned, that the mebichsas nefashos. But here the issue will be is that ktanim, they don't have das, they're not obligated. If everyone will be a ktanim, it might become nicer. So you want to have adults there. Now the word oinanim is a loaded word. So I want to tell you like this, that if someone became an oinan, we already learned that the Rambam paskins that aninus only goes until the end of that day. Now, if someone became an oinan prior to Chatzos Hayoin, remember this, we shouldn't have a stira later. That means that when the zman of the chiyuv came about, they were already an oinan. That person does not bring Pesach Rishon. It's very important. The Rambam here is speaking about a person who, when the chiyuv came about, that person they were not, everyone was living. Then sometime in the afternoon, God forbid, he lost one of his relatives, and now he became an oinan. So here we say, since the chiyuv of Pesach was already chal on him, and another detail, an oinan can't eat kachim, but the eating is only at night. At night, he's not an oinan midoraisa. In that case, just to make it clear, that's when the Rambam holds you bring for an oinan. Right? An oinan can eat at night, but you don't make a whole group. People that are sick, they don't eat a lot. People that are in mourning, not halachic oinanim, they don't have an appetite. Shema yashiru pesach v'yaviula de psul. Make sure, common sense, that is that it's not going to be left over. Now, just make sure you don't have nice. Next, in other words, you have to be educated. You have to be born into the severity of nicer is something that you have to experience. So you want to have people that already they saw it, that's how their fathers were, that's how their sages were, and then you're sure that this person will also less chance they'll, God forbid, be nice. Because imagine no one can eat a kazais, no one. Or my friends, we're speaking about that the minority of the call is Tameim, the Talmud does not bring Pesach Rishon. So if the ganze Chabura was invalid, then it's possible. Which will be the normal case. So it's not that no one was able to eat. You didn't do the ideal. Some people are unable to eat a kazayis. You shechted it both leminuyov and the shaloi leminuyov. Lamulim vilarelim litoirim vilatameim kasher. She'elu haruim lo yoichlem ka'alach. And v'acherim, it's as if there was not, they're not bad to ruin it. Ke'ilu lo ychashav aleim. Halach avav. Shchot lamulim. Shchita was done only for mul. But the Zrikas Adam was done with Shem Mulam Arelim. What did we just say before? That it's Lamulim. If the Shechita is for both, it's okay. Shechita is okay. Zrika may not be for both. Puzzle. Shazrika Chamura Shehi Ikera Karbin. Shchatoi Lamulim. But you had in mind, Sheyischapru by Arelim. Kapara comes from the Zrika. Bite it. But Lizrei Damai only for people that can eat it. HaPesach kosher. Wow. HaPesach kosher. Meaning no one was yoitza. No one is yoitza. Pesach kosher means that the animal, you do this rikas adam, the owners get to eat it, but they have to bring another carbon. The ein odem yoitza by chavasai. Lefi she'ein machshavas oichlen basrika. Okay, it doesn't ruin it, but Yaakov, what are you saying? Yaakov, I cannot hear you well. Okay, right. Halacha zay. Mishu bari b'shah shchita, and he became ill b'shah zrika. Oichayla b'shah shchita, punkt verkehrt ubari b'shah zrika. So ein shechtim is orkan olav. Achi a body misha shchita acha zrika. Halacha ches. Shoichet adam al yidei b'noi ubitei aktanim. So now that we introduced minuyim, what happens if you have minor children? So when you shecht it, you can have in mind your minor children. Or and al yidei avdoi b'shorchasei aktanim. And you don't need their consent. Beimidat and ben shalemidat. Because they are minors. However, avol and shoichet al yidei b'noi ubitei aktanim. They need to know that you are including them. Now, even though you didn't get a affirmative consent, but they knew and did not protest, that's good enough. Now, and you're a minor bachadol, you're a 10-year-old chevraman. He included himself in another group with his chavedim. So the din is yoitzim b'shal Rambam. No, they are included in two. Which one will trump the father? Because they don't have enough das to make that decision. However, halacha yud shachad ala de ishtoi, an adult, your wife, or and b'noi b'tag doilem, or ba'avshchas yoivrim, and they also went ahead and they had their own shchita. That's called a protest. Ein l'chamichi gadol misa. And therefore, halacha yud aleph, ha'isha shehi bebeis baila. Now that's going to be key, right? Especially as it was in the times of Chazal, that when a couple got married, the first Yom Tov, the first Pesach, she would go back to her parents' home. So when she's in her husband's home, and her father had her in mind, counted her in, and her husband counted her in. So she's included in which one? So it depends where they are spending Pesach. If she's the base baila, the shachad alevia, the shachal since she's the base baila, Teichel Mishal baila. But and if they know that they're spending the first Yom Tiv in her father's home, she doesn't have to be there at this second. But it's clear that the first Yom Pesach with her family. Now, Mikan ve'elach, after the first year, she gets the pick. Guys, when she's the base baila, she does not get the pick. When she's the base avia, she gets the pick. But we want her to make that choice during Shchit. And this Yasim bit Shchita for himself. And now this is the big rule we have to remember. You don't get to pick. You have to find out which one was slaughtered first. Makpida means that each one is always concerned that their shutev is going to steal. They're going to be using the Eved more than him. They're constantly tug of war. They're very makpid. They're faginish. Then lo yoichal mishnel shneim. He cannot have of either. But the amen makpidim then, and each owner had him in mind. Yochel then mimakim sheyirtze yoichal. Wow. Why doesn't the Rambam write? You have to have in mind b'shas shchit. I'll tell you why. Because since the master has the right to shech for his evet shaloi midatoi, Gavaldik. That's why it works over here. Now the famous case, one possibility is that two people own an Eved and one of them gave the Eved a document of emancipation. This is, remember, the Mishnah Rishayna, the Mishnah Achrayna, that Beisilul at the end, they were Chayzer Kebishamai, Tikantem es Rabbi, Aval Atzmoi, like Tikantem, because of the L'Shavas Yitzhara. Okay, so here, Lo Yoichal, Lo Mishal Rabbi, Lo Mishal Atzmoi, Ad Sheyosek Ben Chayden, which is another way that you would pressure, you understand, even everyone was minded that the rabbi has to give him a document of emancipation, and if not, you're ruining it for him. He cannot do it. Halacha Yudal. At kama nimnan ala Pesach. How many people can you include? At sheyia boy kezai sechol echad v'yachad, which is actually ideal. And just to give a few words of intro regarding Chagigas Yudalid, there's a mitzvah to bring a Chagiga on every Yom Tov. That's called Chagigas Tezvav. Yom Tov is Tezvav. But by Pesach, we're so careful not to have noisa. And you have the smallest amount of time because you can only begin eating it at night. You can only eat it until the morning. Very little time. So the solution is that if you count in more people and you make a cheshbon, everyone will have a very small amount. So then you're guaranteed it's going to get finished. And even if someone later says, I can't eat it, so the other guy will eat it. There's a problem. The problem is that, just to know, that it's not good to eat the Pesach starving. Just like achila gasa, means if you are already full, eating when you're stuffed is an act of meals. It's not halachically called eating. Eating when you're starving a little bit is not ideal. It's not derech shrara, the way we're supposed to eat kachim, like kings eat. So the solution is make another carbon, a carbon which is a chagiga that has a lot more time to be eaten. There's no pressure. Eat almost until your satisfaction from that carbon. And then the last kazayis, which will bring you to, now I'm good, that is what they ate from the carbon Pesach. So you make a cheshbon, how many people should you include? Everyone should have a kazayis. Now, nimnin olav, you count them. Then people can change their minds because it's a social event also. So who says I want to eat with this group? I want to eat with that group. All of these decisions could be made to be included, to be excluded up until the time of Shechita. The key that's essential is Shechita. That's it. Now, nimnu alav. I don't even know about it. So to show him, no, you are including more people. let's say there comes a point that if you add another person, there isn't enough of a kazayis for everyone. So the shoinim sheshum kazayis oichlin or p'turim alasis pesach sheni. But if the last people that were included, now that you opened up the animal, there was less meat than you thought. So now that you don't divide it equally and no one having a kazayis, which ruins it for everyone. In Sao Paulo, there's a lot of minyanim. Not the numbers of Yidden are not like America. My Zayda used to say that all you need in Sao Paulo is to make one more shul and no one will have a minyan. Because you understand, once you're up to everyone who has exactly 10, then the next minyan is going to take away from everyone. No one will have anything. So here, that's the system. You're adding people, but if you realize that there isn't enough of a kazayis for each one, you have to make that type of cheshbon. But at what person, if not for these last people, there would have been a kazayis. They are yoitz. And the final halach, is like this. We're going to learn later that once you are part of a chabura, once you are sitting down to eat, you may not leave your group. You may not leave. The meat may not be taken out. Two separate dinim. Now, we know that we're eating together. If any one of us decided to count someone without the consent of the group, could be the group doesn't want to eat with it. Halacha tezvav. But without notifying Bnei HaChabura. And when they discover that one of them invited Chaim Yankel and they don't want to eat with Chaim Yankel, Bnei HaChabura Rishoyim, Litoin Loi Chelkoi Achar Sheyitzala Be'esu Achila, U'Bnei HaChabura Eichlam Yishalem. Once you're sitting and eating, you can't leave the group. But what they would do over here is they would first prepare the meat. And they would tell, let's say Reuven invited Chaim Yankel. People don't like Chaim Yankel, which is sad, but a fact. So after they prepare the meat, they can give the meat for the Reuven, for Chaim Yankel, and tell Reuven, you know what, you invited him, you eat with him. You're not leaving the Chabura. Lechatchila, you're separated. But b'shas achila, you can't be moitzi the basar. But this is before the achila. If one of them is a gargaron, and he's chopping or he's eating too much, so before they say, listen, you'll take your kazayas and go eat over there. However, if you knew that he was there and he's not a gargaron, you can't decide that later. Okay. In other words, you have to have a certain amount of avos yisrael, not to stam kick anyone out. Once you're part of a chabura, ideally, you want to have everyone eating it together. How great is that? God willing to be continued.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question? Go on.
I'm saying that we're going to have to see him Tuesday night, 5:30 in Yaron and Oranit Chassid's house.
Rabbi, in the first parak we discussed if the Shabbos was the 14th, but he didn't yet discuss if Shabbos was if Friday was the 14th.
Yeah. Much better. Much better.
Yeah.
If Friday is the 14th, Danny.
Yeah. So then, meaning we said if it's Shabbos is the 14th, you roast it Motzei Shabbos. What about vice versa? When Friday is the 14th, you're not. If you roast it at night, then you're cooking on Shabbos. So then you have to roast it before Shabbos. Or I'm sure we learned it in Psachim. I don't just remember.
Yeah, we learned it in some Psachim. I think that the meat
was roasted. Or are you allowed to cook it on Shabbos? Are you allowed to cook it on Shabbos?
I don't think so. I think they roasted it adafka on Friday. We learned this in the Gemara. And then they ate it at night. We have to check. Or I'll tell you better that the Rambam is going to write about it. For sure. For sure. Yeah. Wait, to be continued.